Okay, thank you very much, Roberto. So my name is Niklas, and I am a graduate student in the neuroeconomics program. Now, as human beings, we are constantly interacting with other people. And quite often there is a strategic component, or there can be a strategic component to these interactions. For example, when we are competing with others in sports, when we're negotiating terms of a deal, when determining prices for consumer goods, or when teaching new concepts to children. But all of these situations that are arguably quite different have in common is they require some extent of what we call mentalization. That is the ability to put yourself into someone else's head and try to understand what's going on in their mind in order to predict how they will behave in the future. And it's not just strategic situations, as you can probably imagine, but this ability to mentalize is important in all sorts of human social interactions. And so given this fundamental nature, in my research I'm interested in if we can develop a tool that allows us to precisely quantify how good people are at mentalizing. And so that naturally begs the question, how can we take something as complex and in a way abstract like mentalization and bring it down into something very controlled and research lab-like? And it turns out that the answer is surprisingly simple, that there is a simple game that probably many of you will be familiar with, even back from their childhoods, that does a surprisingly good job at this, namely a rock, paper, scissors game. And so for those of you who are less familiar with this, very briefly, in this game, two players choose either rock, paper, or scissors, and then rock beats scissors, scissors beats paper, and paper beats rock. So there's no single action that will always make you win, and there's no simple strategy that will always make you win. But instead, the only way to win above chance is precisely putting yourself into the head of your opponent and predicting what they're going to be playing next. And so to illustrate this a bit further, let me walk you through some of the increasingly sophisticated strategies that people might be employing, consciously or unconsciously in this game, using the Simpsons family as an example. So many of you will know Homer, who is a fairly simple-minded, kind of lazy person. He might not put too much thought into the game and just repeat whatever worked in the past. If I won with rock, I might as well try it again. Now, if Homer was facing Bart, who is a bit smarter, Bart might pick up this pattern and correctly predict that Homer is going to repeat this action and exploit this knowledge. So he might correctly predict that Homer will play rock, play paper, win the game. Now, in turn, if Bart was facing Lisa, the most intelligent one from the family, she might go yet a step further and really start getting into Bart's head and understand what he is thinking about her behavior. So she might think or correctly infer that he thinks she'll play rock and thus he'll play paper, and then she'll play scissors instead to turn it around and win the game. And so there's a series of increasingly complex strategies with increasingly higher mentalization demands. And so then how does this all tie back to the question and the goal raised in the beginning that we want to have a quantitative tool to assess mentalization? Well, what we do is we took these different strategies, the way Homer, Bart, and Lisa would play, and we formalized them in the form of a computer program that our research participants compete against. And that allows us to have very much control over the exact strategy that the opponent is playing. So for example, if our participant is facing a Bart opponent that is always responding to what they did in the past, we can then have them play some 40 rounds of the game. And then to analyze the resulting behavior, we've used the very same computer model, but now we turn the question around and ask, what is the most likely strategy amongst those strategies that the participant is playing in response to this programmed computer opponent? And so, for example, one participant that you see here started out playing very much like a Homer, maybe not really having a clue in the beginning what to do, then started exploring a very complex strategy, even more sophisticated than what Lisa is doing, and finally settles on this Lisa strategy that I mentioned earlier, which indeed in this case of a Bart opponent is the ideal strategy. And so what this gives us is this desired quantitative tool that allows us to not just identify how high up in the hierarchy people that can go, that is how complex their mentalization processes can be, but also how quickly and flexibly they can adapt to different strategies in the opponent. And me being a neuro or aspiring neuroeconomist, we then took this a step further and brought people into the MRI scanner for about an hour each to play this game some 200 times to try to address the question if there's a set of brain regions that underlie this fundamental capacity of mentalization. And indeed, we were able to identify a set of activation patterns that is systematically linked to how people learn to predict others' behavior. And this is really exciting to us, not only because of what it tells us about the inner workings of the brain, but also because it has the potential for a set of very practical application. For example, it might help in detecting some of the clinical disorders that are characterized by a deficit in mentalization, such as Asperger's syndrome or autism spectrum disorder, where people might have regular intelligence, but a specific deficit in this very capability to take other people's perspective. And this is indeed something that we're right now testing in a group of 100 people, either with or without Asperger's syndrome, if we can use this neural fingerprint that we've identified previously to aid in getting a diagnosis, something which is notoriously hard for this syndrome based on existing measures. And so to sum up, I told you how mentalization is a crucial ability in almost all human interactions, particularly so in strategic ones. I've walked you through a new tool that we conceived that allows us to quantify how good people are at mentalization, and how we then use this tool to identify a neural fingerprint of mentalization, which finally we are currently testing if it's possible to use this as a means to detect some clinical disorders. Thank you very much for listening.